Joining me now, Senator Roger Marshall. I think I heard chuckling over my EV comment there, the senator from Kansas. Senator, great to have you here.
Yeah, David, just to put an exclamation mark on your conversation, 1/3 of the car dealers in America sent a letter to the White House yesterday saying they can't sell the EV cars, that they have a backpile of them. Nobody wants them. They'd love to sell them, but nobody can afford them. Nobody wants them. This will go down probably. I think this green new energy thing will go down in history as probably the biggest mistake that the federal government actually did from a policy standpoint. I mean, we could, from a non-national security standpoint. So, yeah, you can't even sell one. You can't give the darn things away.
Yeah, look, I don't know how closely you follow the auto industry, Senator. I used to do a car talk show many years ago, so I follow it, and I'm a car guy. But months ago, and I think it's probably close to 2 months now, the chairman of Toyota Motors, Mr. Toyota with a D, Toyoda, said to the rest of the industry, you read the room wrong on this, and they've been dropping the prices, offering discounts. A lot of federal subsidies are going away as the federal government can't hand out money hand over fist as they can for these automakers, and they're looking for financing. This system is failing because it's not market ready. There's not a market for it or an infrastructure.
Right, and what the dealers tell me, this is not Roger Marshall talking, the dealers tell me, pound for pound, apples to apples, an electric car is in the $20,000 to $30,000 range higher. And of course, we're not going to be able to combine wheat with an electric motor. So we and haul the wheat to town, and we need power. And so far, the technology's not out there, nor the support structure. And until we have modular reactors in every city, it's just not going to be feasible to even think about it.
Yeah, and we will put it aside for the moment, but it costs more to put in that infrastructure than it does to use that. What's that other natural thing? Oh, fossil fuels, petrol. But anyway, that's we'll put that aside for the moment. Let's dive into something that I've heard a lot about on this show and from the Patriot audience, I think every one of our shows, and this is the attempts to combine the Ukraine and Israel funding package. It's getting close to Christmas, so everybody wants to put Christmas trees together with lots of ornaments. So you've called for an immediate passage of a standalone funding package. Where is that? What's going on there?
Well, the Democrats voted it down already. David, we were able to commandeer the floor recently, the Senate floor. We came in and commandeered the floor and forced a vote on standalone Israel funding. So just hours before this vote, Chuck Schumer is on the Washington Mall saying, I won't sleep until we get funding for Israel. Well, 3 hours later, he talked every Democrat into voting against it. So right now he has no intention of putting it back on the floor because this divides their caucus like nothing I've ever seen. It's an emotional thing, David, up here. I really just assumed the Democrats were pro-Israel, that indeed they're not. They're pro-Iran, and you cannot be both. In this world we live in, you cannot be pro-Iran and pro-Israel. So it is dead here. And by the way, we're no closer today on funding Israel than we were on October the 7th. There's been no progress made, and it just gets more and more complicated when you put each one of these pieces of this puzzle together. He's trying to fund Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and then actually make border security worse. So we're going nowhere really quickly up here.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately typical, especially in the Club of 100. Border security. Alejandro Mayorkas went down to the border yesterday from an update from border security that he could have gotten off just about any piece of paper and anybody in the country. However, hell no, your words, to supplemental funding requests without tighter border security. So attempting to use the power of the purse, how's that progress?
Yeah, border. No matter what the question is, as far as I'm concerned, the answer is secure the border. If you want to talk about Ukraine funding, let's talk about how we're going to secure the border, even ahead of Israel funding, to be honest. I think that this is the number one most immediate national security threat that our nation faces. And your listeners know the numbers. You know how bad this is. that we're losing 300 Americans every day to fentanyl poisoning, hundreds of known terrorists, tens of thousands of aliens from suspicious countries. All those numbers are very real. I think that we all should be very concerned about our own safety and security. Speaker Mike Johnson, who I think is doing a heck of a job over on the House side, spoke to us yesterday, spoke to all the senators, and the first thing he said was border, border, border. He said, I wish I could get you all T-shirts that said border, border, border on it. So I don't know why a Republican would even have a conversation with a Democrat about anything else on the supplemental until we figure out the border, because there's going to be no supplemental without border security. We have the votes. Our leadership is speaking up and saying we will vote down cloture. It takes 60 votes to vote for cloture to proceed to the vote on the supplemental, and we've got the votes. Unless there's meaningful border security on this supplemental bill, we're going to vote down cloture.
All right. Like that, by the way. I wish I could get that out of every single Republican senator about no without border security. But unfortunately, we don't have that. Good for you for keeping that hell no approach to that. Let's go to something that the Senate has responded to the Biden administration on. Now, this goes to Executive Order 14019, promoting access to voting. I actually was talking about that in recent days on the show. And here we have the Biden administration weaponizing agencies within government with, for lack of a better term, orders to maximize their efforts to get people to vote, to present plans, to enact plans under the guise of promoting access to voting. We have access to voting. We have problems with the election systems at different levels. But your take on the Biden administration, looking at another way to weaponize federal agencies. And my question, isn't that a little bit in violation of the Hatch Act?
Gosh. David, unfortunately, you're understating the problem. The deeper I get into this issue, the worse it becomes. And I'll give you an example. We have 33 federally qualified health centers in Kansas. They are funded by the government. They're originally set up to help people who have access to care. A great thing. I support the federally qualified health centers. But now the Biden administration is in there registering people to vote when they come to get their blood sugar checked, right? I think it's total weaponization by this White House, and they're smart. I mean, they do things that I would have never dreamed of. So that's about one example, and our staff is working with Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and the usual cast of characters that stick up for our Constitution, Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, and saying, wait a second, what's going on here? So we just discovered this maybe 2 weeks ago. And we're trying to uncover, the facts, and then we'll start sending letters. Maybe there's a Congressional Review Act. It never ends. This administration, one reason they want this 10,000 people crossing the border every day is so we can't pay attention to what they're doing with their left hand. But you're absolutely right, and it's worse than you and I even think.
Yeah, they play the card, the Biden administration, that is. They play the race card. And this, I'm just going from the order itself. For generations, black voters and other voters of color have faced discriminatory policies and other obstacles that disproportionately affect their communities. Somebody tell them it's not 1965. Okay, we've advanced as a nation. Black people, I'm black. A surprise for Areva Martin. I can go out and vote. I just voted recently in the election. There were black people working the polls, and you know what? No riots broke out. I cast my vote. So did the white guy next to me, the white lady, the Latino, whatever. But they play this game as if the color of your skin or the ethnic identity makes you still a victim. And by using these agencies, and to bring this to the money and what certainly the House, but your body, the Senate, can get involved in, how do you use is it the funding for these agencies? Is it something with the way their funds are supposed to be used? Is there a way to take on the administration and shut this down, or at least attempt to shut it down?
Yeah, I think that there is, David, but it's going to be a lot of rifle shots. It's going to be, I talked about the federally qualified health centers, but I'll be surprised if we don't find USDA out there doing this. And every They're just incredible at weaponizing every one of these. So I'm going to have to give it some thought. I'm not one to overpromise. And I do think there's some really good, people up here. I mentioned some of their names help us figure out how to push back on it. But I want to make one other point. Let's pivot the other direction. Let's look in the mirror ourselves. There were enough conservative Christians that stayed home and did not vote this last election that would have changed who has the Senate majority right now. And probably going back to 2020, that would have changed the outcome theoretically of that election. As well. So what we can change is we can get people with conservative values to have to go vote as well. Everyone, yes, that has a legal vote, I encourage them to go vote. But my goodness, if you're a conservative Christian right now, or you're conservative Jewish faith, anyone with traditional Kansas American values, you need to go vote. So let's change what we can change. I'm going to work on this, but they're just 2 steps ahead of us. And they kind of caught us napping on this one, to be honest. But I'm pushing back. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, look, I think your point about many rifle shots to do this, when you talk about 600 federal agencies, this is dangerous. And if it gets embedded and remains in these agencies, the Democrats, just like the union vote strategy, will be able to weaponize this cycle after cycle after cycle.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I'm baffled myself. And in a day up here where I'm trying to secure the border, keeping my priorities straight, secure the border, let's get our American hostages home. We need to help Israel. And then you throw something like this at me, so I got to take staff off those projects to say, okay, how are we going to combat this as well? But I tell you this much: we are getting better organized. Mike Lee heads what we call the steering committee, and this would be the very traditional ultra-conservative wing of the Senate up here. There's 18 of us, and it feels like we're growing that group out a little bit as well. And I think seeing our leadership, I'm going to go back to the bright news here, to have our leadership on the Republican Senate side step up and say, we are going to vote down cloture unless there's meaningful border security. I know we've already addressed this, but I can't tell you what a victory that is for Americans.
Looking forward to it, keeping an eye on it. Always appreciate you coming on to bring us up to speed. And I think for this interview, we'll just call you Senator Roger Hell No Marshall. I like that.
My dad would be proud.